let's have a look at working out a percentage of a quantity. So something like working out 22% of £700. Now there are a myriad of different ways of working this out. I'm going to show you 2 or 3 ways you can work this out. We need to be able to do it for paper 1, no calculator. You need to be able to do it very quickly if you get something like this on paper 2. So I'll show you at least 2 ways, possibly 3 ways of doing it. Okay, the first way I'm going to suggest we make use of these facts at the side. You should already know if you work out 50% of something, it's the same as sharing it by 2. 50% of something is half of something. If you work out 10% of something, it's the same as sharing by 10. And if you work out 1% of something, 1% of something means 100th of something. It's 1 part out of 100. So you've just got to share by 100 to get 1/100th of something. So 1% share by 100. Learn those 3 things, and then any percentages calculation like this on paper 1 you should be able to cope with. So for example, 22% of £700. What I would do is first work out what 10% is. 10% of 700. So you take the 700, and you should know that 10% is the same as sharing by 10. So we just share by 10. And that is just knock a nought off, £70. So we know that 10% is £70. Okay, well I want 22%. Okay, so let's double that then to get 20%. So 20% of 700 is just double the 70, which is £140. So we've got £140 for 20%. Okay, but I want 22%. Okay, fine, let's work out what 1% is then. So 1% of 700, you take the 700, to work out 1% of something, you just share it by 100. So we share by 100. And knock 2 noughts off, gives you an answer of £7. Now, I want 2%, because I want 22% of 700. 1%, if you double it, you get 2%, so take the 7 and double it, you get £14. And that is what 2% is. So 20% is that, 2% is that. So if you want 22%, so therefore 22% of 700 will simply be the 20%, which is 140, and you add to it the 2%, which is 14, you get a grand total of £154. And notice how I've set it out. That's how the examiner would like to see it set out if you're not using a calculator. Okay? I'm going to do, in this space here, 1 line calculation that you could use to get this answer if you were doing it on paper 2 with a calculator in your hand. So, or you could do this, 22%. Okay? You could say 22% of £700. You take the £700, if you share it by 100, that'll work out what 1% is. Share by 100. You then simply have to multiply it by 22 to get 22%. So share by 100, get 1%, times by 22, you get 22%. So 700 share by 100, that gives you 7, and 7 times 22, you had a calculator in your hand, would give you £154. There you go. So that's what you could do with a calculator, and that's the layout if you were doing it slowly for paper 1. Okay? Let's try another example. Question 2. I'll do it a bit more quickly this time. Okay, so for question 2, I'll do a slightly more awkward calculation. What about 17.5% of, I'll keep the amount of money fairly easy, so we can do it as a paper 1 or a paper 2 calculation. 17.5% of £400. 17.5% is quite an important percentage figure because quite often the VAT rate is 17.5%, value added tax set by the government. It's actually not 17.5% at the moment, but it has been in the past and it could well be in the future. So very popular questions. So if you want 17.5% of that, first thing, work out 10% of 400. 10% share by 10. So 400 share by 10. You get £40. Okay, now a little trick that you should be aware of. 17.5% is a special one that you should learn off by heart. What you could do is, yes, you could work out 1%, times it by 7 to get 7%, and then take the 1% and halve it to get 0.5% and add all these things up. Much, much easier. If you just halve the 10% to get 5% and halve the 5%, you'll get 2.5%. And then if you notice, if you add 10, 5 and the 2.5, they give 17.5. So that's the technique I'm going to use. So 5% of 400, just half the 10%. So you just halve the £40. So that's £20. 2.5% of 400, just halve the 5%. So you halve the 20, you get £10. So if you want 17.5%, you must add those three percentages together to get 17.5% of 400. So you just simply add those three numbers together. 14, 20, 60, add 10, there you go. £70 is 17.5% of 400. And that's it. Very common question on paper 1, and it's very important that you realise 10%, 5%, 2.5% is the easiest way to get to the answer. Of course, if you was on paper 2, then very simple, you could just simply take the £400, you could share it by 100 to get 1%, and then you'd simply times it by 17.5 to get 17.5%. 17.5 instead of 17.5. Okay, 400 shared by 100 is 4, and 4 times that, you would get straight away the £70, like so. Okay, so there you go, there's a very simple calculator way, and there's a very simple way without a calculator to do a percentage question where you're working out a percentage of a quantity. Okay, that's the end of this short video.